officials, with the pollution control board officials over a period of time, and we have found them very supportive and very interactive. Having done all of that, it's a little bit of a disappointment to see the contract, because what we have on the ground seeing in terms of support, in terms of interaction, has not really come through in the contract that we are seeing here on paper today.
That's because the people are not listening, no?
Not even listening to you.
Yeah.
They have their mindset.
Exactly.
They have their mindset.
So I just conclude by saying that Mr. Manjunath Reddy has inaugurated the dry waste collection center in the BBMP, and I think he has seen that simple model and how well it works with the staff. So he is aware of what we've done on the ground. But I'd like to reiterate, sir, what I was mentioning is that the kind of support that we have seen from the BBMP and various officials in actually coming forward and being open to the idea of capacity building and taking up the principle of segregation at source has not translated in this document, which is really going to be the primary paper to scale up this initiative to a city level. What we are doing is in pockets. It's because people are coming forward, they're willing to spend their time and energy in driving it. But to imagine that they will do this 365 days of the year and for the rest of their lives is a little too much to expect. Which is why we expect that at some point the system will take over, and that system is getting driven by this contract. And we don't see that translation of that happening in this contract. So I'll just quickly go over some of the points. We had a couple of rounds of discussion in the last 2 days. Some of the points that we felt needed to be reworked, needed to be addressed, and needed to be watertight. Per the draft, it says that there should be compartments in the tippers and in the hand carts and the collection lorries. We completely think that this is not acceptable. The only way in which segregation can ever be driven is if it is a dedicated vehicle, preferably color-coded, which separates out the collection of wet and dry and makes it very clear to the person who is giving the waste what he is giving and where is it going. So we would really like this. This is a non-negotiable modification that we request in the contract, that compartments in collection vehicles are not acceptable. It has to be a total dedicated vehicle. Either separately, a dedicated vehicle which will run on separate trips. So the next qualification to that is, you specified in the draft that collection will be done every day of all waste. We are running programs in communities right across the city, and we have found that the best way in which it works is when people know that there is a weekly collection of dry waste that takes place, and they are very happy to participate in it. They know that once a week I have to go out and give my dry waste. The rest of the time, the only thing that goes out is the wet. This has been very well received by communities all over, and we don't see why that cannot be enforced in the contract. So we request that wet waste should be collected daily, dry waste needs to be collected only once a week, maybe some flexibility twice a week, more than that. And especially for bulk generators, large establishments, residential houses and complexes, this is a non-negotiable requirement that dry waste can be picked up just once a week. The third thing which we think is completely non-negotiable is the destinations. There is a lot of effort being made in the new plastic rule handling, in the new environmental laws that are coming in the various rules that we saw here, which are talking about waste stream management. But the contract, unfortunately, just has a very generic MSW and destinations to be specified, and elsewhere in the contract it mentions that those destinations are compost facility, landfill and segregation points. It does not talk about recyclables which need to go to recyclers, which need to go back into the available informal systems that are there in the city. There is no mention of it anywhere in the contract. So the first 3 points we think is completely non-negotiable and needs to be reworded for this to scale up to a citywide level and to have some impact in dealing with the carbon challenge. The draft states that if the generator does not give segregated waste, it is the responsibility of the contractors to segregate the waste at source itself. Treat that along with the time schedule that is given to the contractor. The contractor is given time between 6:30 in the morning to 11 in the morning for household collection. And the service provider also has an event of default for which he is going to be penalized at 10% of monthly payment, which says if there is non-collection, even on a single day, he is going to be penalized. So he has to collect the mixed waste. He has to put people there to segregate it. He has to do this between 6:30 and 11, and he has to do this every day. We do not see this happening. So the draft has to modify it in a way makes it realistic, and the only way in which it can be done is if the onus is on the generator. The generator, we are pushing for waste management on site. This contract simply closes its eyes and does not give even the smallest requirement or incentive to a person to manage his waste on site. It just simply says, give it to your contractor. If you won't do it, he will do it. And we don't see it. This point which I have raised is in the first scope of work terms and conditions, point 111 between alphabet A and E. In the first 5 points that are raised in the draft, we find them completely unacceptable and it needs to be redrafted. Then there is a point on page 9, is 113, which says MSW from bulk generators and commercial establishments should be segregated into biodegradable and non-biodegradable. It doesn't say by whom and when and how, no specifications. So the contractor doesn't know the should is him or the other guy. So there is no onus on who should do it. It also says that the bulk waste generated from such a source should be collected in a segregated form and transported in contractors and tipper lorries. And according to the service agreement that is drafted elsewhere in the agreement, it says it should go to treatment sites and landfills. According to the Pollution Control Board requirement, post 2006, you do not get a certificate of occupancy in your building if you do not set up infrastructure to manage your wet waste. In what way is this contracting supporting that? Nowhere is it telling the contractor that you need to pick up only from buildings post pre-2006 and not those guys who are already required to process it on site. It does not support the contractor in that. Again, it does not tell the bulk generators that they have to process or manage their waste on site. The onus is simply to give the contractor bigger vehicles. So it says all bulk generators have to be serviced through a compactor. More waste, bigger vehicle. So if I decide that I want to sit in the middle of the city and generate 40 tons of waste, no problem, because the BBMP will tell the contractor to run not one compactor, maybe 2 compactors for my service. So we don't think this is acceptable at all. We don't think there is a need for compactors, simply because, as Madam will explain, that the only thing which can be compacted is dry waste. There is no need to compact dry waste because we are looking at handing it over to the recycler, then to a secondary segregation and to the factory. So there is no question of using compactors for dry waste. And if it is for wet waste, the law says that they have to manage the waste on site. So there is no question of bigger and more waste. So the need to procure compactors, especially to deal with bulk generators, is completely non-essential and completely incidental. It doesn't come into the picture at all. There is this new concept of user fee. What we have understood from the contract is that in the purview of the contract it seems to be very incomplete. What we need to understand is really the policy. What is the total policy of BBNP with respect to the user fee? You have talked of a penalty. Is there going to be a link to an incentive? Obviously that may not come within the purview of the contract, but we would like to have a full discussion of the user fee before we are ready to accept it. Then the other point in the draft, which is point 124, which says protection of the environment, and there is a paragraph which talks about all the things that should be done for protection of the environment. Unfortunately, if you then read the schedule of penalties, nowhere is there a penalty to the contractor where leaves are burned, where plastic is burned, and where waste is burned. So there is just this listing or describing of what should not be done, and we know blatantly that every day leaves get burned and waste gets burned, and there is no penalty attached to the contractor for that. Or the officials. Yeah, even in the BBNP obligations it is not specified. Again, the draft nowhere addresses how the monitoring of the segregation compliance is going to take place. So what is described is only the relationship between the contractor and the generator. Who will the generator then report to if there is a problem? How will the contractor escalate the problem if there is non-compliance? Those relationships are not mentioned in the agreement at all. So that's a big question mark. So we only know, we see the face of my contractor. Beyond that, I don't know where this buck stops. Like what was mentioned here earlier, we also believe that the contractor performance needs to be evaluated at the ward level. I, living in my road, am the best judge of what I think is the quality of service that is given to me on my road. I have a right to decide and tell you as BBNP officials whether I am happy with the quality of service that I am seeing on the road. So there has to be, at the ward level, a community participation to decide whether this contractor is doing his job or not. Last 2 points, we would like this draft of the contract to be put on the website for 60 days and get comments from the citizens on the same. And what was also mentioned, that I now visualize that the place in front of my building is now going to have 2 compactors, because I have a Kalyan Mandap on one side and I have the biggest enclave on the other side. And since you tell us that they have to be serviced with compactors, they are not given a place to park. So when I get out of the building, I'm going to have a green color compactor on the left and a blue color compactor on the right. And this is because there's no place given to these guys to park. And they will just simply use the road, and it's not good enough. And if I go to drop my son off in the bus stand, there will be the powder car makers, push cars, which are placed there because they have no place to park.
Thank you.